our first talk of the day. As always, I'm so excited for these talks. If you don't know me, I am the sponsorship lead for MDL, and I'll just be here to moderate the chat and listen because we have Mark here. And if you don't know Mark yet, Mark is an incredible person, but he's also been in the user experience industry since really before it had a title. So he knows this stuff a lot, and he's spoken at a number of events, and really over the past 20 years built up a large amount of experience leading teams, and even instructing in the classroom. So he's an innovator, an incredible person, and he's here today to talk to us about the whole experience of design and the design process at Relevant Bits. So if you have any questions, pop them into the comments and we'll have a little bit of time at the end to answer that. But if not, just sit back and relax, and I'll pass it over to Mark now. Mark, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Rachel. This has been great already. It's pretty cool to see how many people are coming from all over the world. It's also really interesting to see how many engineers are actually showing up for a user experience and design conference. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And it really shows like how tightly integrated all of the roles from user experience to engineering has become over the years. So my name is Mark Dodgson. I'm the CXO at Relevant Bits. And we're a fully remote design and development shop. And our team is located all over the world. I mean, in Canada, the US, and in Europe, which is really great. It means that we can stretch our work hours, our work day. So when we're working on work projects for customers, our work day is not 8 hours, it's 18 plus hours because of the different time zones. So it's great. It also means that we get to work with organizations and companies all over the world. So we're not restricted to geographical location. So, right now we have projects going on in California and North Carolina, Berlin, Switzerland. So they're all over the world. So working for a remote organization and running a remote organization is really great for that type of work. Over the years, I've had the real honor to work with a number of great brands and organizations. Our company tends to work on really more complicated type projects, things that are really data heavy is kind of our sweet spot. So we do a lot of business to business e-commerce projects. We've done work for lots of different libraries and universities like Stanford University and Princeton. So we've had the great opportunity to work with a number of those brands and learn from them, because many of those organizations also have their own internal engineering teams and design and development teams and user experience teams. So it's great to kind of work alongside of those groups as well. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk a little bit about our process. I'll explain what our process is, but I think it's a little bit high level in the sense that process can take you so far, right? So every project is a little bit different. And so I want to be a little bit pragmatic in terms of how I present the work that we do, and just kind of show real life examples of the kind of tests we run, the results that come out of those, the design process, the discovery process. So we'll go through that in more detail. I'll talk a little bit about tools. We try to keep them pretty simple, which is good. We'll talk about some usability research and testing that we do, and I have a couple recommendations at the end. I think this is like the typical image that you think about when you're talking about user experience, right? The person who designed this roundabout clearly didn't anticipate users or visitors wanting to walk straight across it. So it's important that we remember that user experience happens whether we design for it or not. And so it's important that we're really intentional about how we design a user's experience. And so I'll get into a lot more real life examples in this talk. This is going to be a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to just, it's a brief breakdown of how our process works at Relevant Bits when we're starting a project. It's a modified version of the double diamond methodology. So Don Norman from Nielsen Norman Group created this diamond methodology, and it's sort of a hybrid of that. So when we're taking on a new project, the first thing we're doing is a discovery phase and a research phase. So the discovery phase is try to understand everything we can about the project, and we'll go into more details what that looks like. We're running research, and we're trying to define what it is that we're going to build. And then we can get into the design phase, which is, you know, designing the right thing and making sure that we're designing, testing, iterating, and improving the experiences that we're building. So you can see there's kind of there's 5 main phases, but for the design phase, there's 3, and there's like a sketching phase, a wire phase, and a comp phase. And at every stage, they're done with different tools potentially. So Jira is our project management software, and we use that because it's a development team tool. So the handoff from design to development becomes much more streamlined. And then we also have a phase where, you know, our clients have full transparency into all of our Jira boards, so they can come in and see where tickets stand and where the project's at any given moment. And so when we're doing the sketching, wires and comping stages, there's kind of like phases of sketching, reviewing it, goes through a technical review. We iterate on whatever changes we're doing there. We'll test it again. And it kind of goes through this testing phase to make sure things are getting improved at each stage, and then it goes to the client for approval before we move on. And that's to make sure that we don't get to the end of the project and to the end of the design phase and the customer is unhappy. We want approvals kind of the entire way through, so that we're not wasting time and ultimately money. So during discovery, during the pandemic, we haven't been able to, but typically we fly into the locations with our customers and we spend a few days with them. And that it's important just to be in person for those types of things. We have done it remotely for the past couple of years, which has worked fine because everybody's kind of understanding what's going on, but it's good to have that face-to-face with customers. And during discovery meetings, we're trying to, you know, interview. We do a lot of one-to-one interviews with our customers. We start to define their audiences with them and understand who their audiences are. If we're building on existing technology that they have, then we have a tech lead that would be there, and they're auditing systems and trying to get all the information they need, understandings of APIs and things like that. We also want to many of the customers that we have already have internal teams. Potentially, some of them have their own user experience and design teams. And so they have lots of data, they have lots of analytics, they have lots of results from tests. And so we like to review that. And sometimes we do that before we go into these discovery meetings so that we can have bigger conversations with them. And I think one of the most important things on these meetings is trying to define what success means for the project. Because if we don't know what success means for the project, it's likely going to fail. Right, so we need to have a goal, and then it helps us really put a plan in place that we can aim towards. Here's an example. This is a project. I know it's not, you can't read it. It's just to show an example. This was something that happened earlier this year, and I think what's interesting about this is that it was part of the discovery phase. So we wanted to learn a lot more about our customer. And I think what it highlighted when we were going through this process is, as a user experience professional, you need to be flexible and try to, you know, always being aware of what's going on at any given time. So this is a customer that we have in Berlin. They are a big e-commerce company, and they sell a wide range of products in many different verticals, and they do it all on the same site, much like Amazon. The issue that they were having, though, is that they sell everything from like welding equipment to like fitness equipment. And so having those show up on the same site is actually a pretty poor experience. So we came in to help them figure out how we can create almost like a craft experience. So, you know, the verticals each have their own website and their own look and feel. And so we ran an experiment, a workshop called Rose Thorns Buds. And so what we did was we took the entire project team, and you can see on the left side of the image, there's tables. We set up a table for every single person that was on the call. I think it was like 15 people on this call. And every single person at their table had their own Post-it notes. And so they had a Post-it notes for the roses, which are, you know, things that are working. And so things they like about their existing site and applications right now. Then they had Post-it notes for the thorns. So the things that they don't like and the things that they think need to be improved. And then they also had one for buds, which are, you know, big ideas. So what can you do to improve it in the future? And so we ran this exercise with them. And then what we did, as Nicole's probably on this call too, Nicole was, as they were writing these sticky notes, she's taking those and she starts to group them and she starts putting them in clusters. And that's what the image is on the right. And what it starts to highlight is, if you look at each of the columns, you can start to see where their team is looking at things that are really good, things that are problems, and things that are big opportunities. And so then we start to title those and give them groupings. At the same time, while we're running this, our team is running one-to-one stakeholder interviews, not just with the project team, but also with the executive team, so the level above them, because we want to make sure that whatever we're going to be building aligns from top to bottom. And what was really interesting is that what came out of this exercise is that not everything aligned with what the executive team and the project team and the creative team were all thinking. They weren't aligned internally. And so I think in terms of the flexibility, we could see there was going to be problems if we built something and not everybody agreed. So what we did was we built out a chart that took all of the research that we had done and all of the stakeholder interviews and all of the thorns and bud sticky notes, and plotted them in each group. And then we started to figure out, like, where is their misalignment from the group above. So on the right hand side, you can see executive team, creative team, project team, and then our own personal market research. And so everything was grouped that way, and everywhere there is a red dot was where there was misalignment in their own internal teams. And I think this is important, right? I mean, we all need to be working as a team. We need to be achieving, working towards the same goals. And I think what this does is it highlights that we can now go back to them, have these really great meetings, and say, okay, here's where there's misalignment. How can we make sure that everybody's on the same page? And we did that, and we ended up building out a very successful project with them for that. But again, this is all part of that initial discovery and research, and just being a little bit flexible to kind of figure out where you need to go next. Once we get through discovery and research, we start to do things like write things like user stories. So this is really, taken from behavior-driven development. So it's more from the engineering side of things. And we'll write stories that are from the end user's perspective. And so the idea here is that a story is written like, as a type of user, I want some goal, so that's some reason. So an example of that, of course, is as a judge, I want to change a score so I don't need to bother an admin if an error is made. And so this was for a diving app that we were actually working on last year. And you can see on the right there's tons and tons of stories that we write. And we write all these stories for every different user type. But what we get out of these is lots of great information. So that story, that one single story, tells us what user type it is. It's a judge, so we know what their user role is. It tells us the goal, so they want to change a score, so we need to make sure we got editing capabilities for them. And the reason is the judges don't want to go find an already busy admin to make changes during a meet potentially, right? So we're trying to streamline, make things a little easier for them. And so that one story gives us lots of information that we can then go and use for the design process. Another thing that is useful, and we don't always use it on every project, but there are a number that we do have them, which is creating user personas. And so this happens to be one that we created for the Cleveland Public Library. Library, of course, is serving the entire community. So I think there was probably 12 or 13 different personas for this particular project. But I think the important thing here is, you're trying to make sure they're as realistic as possible, right? We want demographic information. We want to understand their background story, their goals, their pain points, their needs. And again, it's based off of actual research. And of course, these aren't real people; they're customer archetypes. But we want to make sure they're as real as they can be, because that's gonna be because we use personas when we're developing features. So you can say, okay, if I'm building this feature, how would Trent respond to this feature, right? So in fact, Autodesk, one of our biggest clients, has their own internal set of personas. And when we're building those features out, we're like thinking about how each one of those personas would use it. Another thing that we tend to do a lot is build out user journeys. And so we want to understand, how is a particular user type actually going to interact with the application? Again, this was, so an example of this is, we worked on this diving app last year, and what we were able to do is like say, okay, if this is a person, if it's a diver logging in for the very first time, what is the flow that they could take? And there's lots of directions they could take, right? And they can go down these different paths and you know, fill in different fields and then get redirected to somewhere else. And so we need to understand where those are. And this is super important, not only for the design phase, but also for the engineering phase, right? So when we start to take a look and say, this is what we got to build, right? And this is the experience that needs to be created. And so what's interesting here is you can see, like, you know, we've got one for the diver at the top, and that's the flow for them. The coach has a different path, right? A coach is going to want to create a dive meet. And so what's the path that they go through that? What's the process that they go to create a dive meet? And then there's also paths like the bottom one, which is I want to join a meet. And so it affects multiple user roles. So diver, coach, judge, they all can take that path, right? But we need to document all of those so we can start to figure out what are we going to design and how are we going to build it. And then combined with user profiles, we can start to see how different they are, right? And so this is an example of one for a bank that we did a number of years ago. And so, you know, this is a woman named Sue. Again, customer archetype. She's, you know, if you look at her behavioral variables, she's computer savvy, right? And so we make sure that flow is appropriate for her. And here's another one, Sandra, and she is less computer savvy and has different variables that affect her behavior. But if I flick back and forth, you can see how the journey is actually different for both of them, right? Now, there are things that are similar across them, but the journey is different. And so we need to make sure that we're accommodating that. And I think another piece to this is sometimes that journey isn't all digital, right? Sometimes it's like phone calls or, you know, whatever else may affect them offline. Another thing that we always do, of course, when we're building up projects is the information architecture. So we want to make sure that we understand how is somebody actually going to interact with your application or your website. And so there's lots of tools that we use to build out the information architecture. Usually we're just starting with the basics. So we get a list of all the things that we know need to be there. We review if it's an existing application. We'll look at analytics and user flows. You know, sometimes we're trying to create something completely new, and we'll do card sorting exercises. And so during those card sorting exercises, we can document all of the different you know, pieces of content or templates or pages throughout the application. And we can recruit users and get them to sort them all and group them all, and then even name them. So we can see, well, if you know, most people grouped these links together and named them the about section, then we should probably call it the about section because that's what they would naturally be looking for. So it gives you really great info for that. And out of the information architecture, we get sitemaps. And this is the part where we're now getting to the point of seeing what actually needs to be designed, right? And so this is a relatively simple sitemap, which is great. But what you can do is you can really start to see, like, here's the homepage. So we know we're going to need to design the homepage. We know we're going to need templates for this section and this section, right? So we can start to see what actually needs to be designed and developed. So this is the phase where we start really getting into design. We tend to work to start doing really, really lo-fi sketches. And the reason for that is that they're really, they're cheap, right? I mean, we can do them quickly, and we're not wasting a lot of time, and we can get really quick feedback from not only our stakeholders, but we can also test sketches with real users, right? So one of the things that we've done in the past is taken our rough sketches, uploaded them to InVision, put hot links on them, wrote scenarios, and then recruited users and just ran tests them. And they're clicking on your rough sketches as if it was a real application. And so again, super cheap and super fast, right? And it gets us to the next stage. And so here's some examples we've done. Again, they're not beautiful, right? They're just trying to give us a way to get to the next step. So this is a project for opensource.com. And we were just trying to figure out, like, what does their new navigation look like? What does it look like on mobile? Here's multiple variations of it, right? And this went through many, many, many iterations. But again, we can knock these out in an hour or two. And if you went to wires and comps and things like that, that takes time, and it becomes money. Here's another one for a product that we built for ourselves. And again, it's just to try to see, like, what does it mean? Like, what does this stuff start to look like? It doesn't mean this is what it's going to look like at the end, and it doesn't. but it gives us somewhere to start. This was for a project for Stanford University, and the reason I have the big image in the sketch in the bottom there is that was my sketch with the client on site, and it's ugly. It's a mess, but we iterated on that initial sketch and got the ones in the background, and it's just enough to get us to the next stage. Once we finish the sketching stage, we do wireframes. We go into wireframes, and again, wires are like focus on structure. So no colors, no fonts, no imagery. We don't want any of our customers being focused on that. It's about content hierarchy and structure of the page. We can also do really quick updates at this stage too, which is good because we're not focusing on all those details, because ultimately this isn't what it's going to look like. It's just where things could mostly, relatively be placed on the page. And so there's examples of ones we've done for B2B e-commerce for like sportswear company. They do like ski wear, and we just start to document how things will lay out and what it could potentially look like. This is for the diving app, so this was some of the wires that came out of that. And again, this isn't what the app looks like in the end, but it's enough to get us to that next stage. This is for a library at Indiana University, and again, even little things here. We one of the problems that came out of Indiana University is 60% of the calls to their library are literally just for like library hours, because they have a number of different locations. And so one of the first things we did was put a location, an hours block up here, and it reduced the number of calls coming in instantly. So it's just like little details, but we can start to think out, okay, here's the goal, and when we build out this wire, are we actually going to achieve that goal with this design? Now, some of these kind of tasks are all happening at once, right? And interaction requirements is one of those. So when we're going from wires to comps, we start to document interaction requirements all at the same time. And this is kind of, this is a technique really to bridge the gap between design and development. So we want to make sure that we document, like, how should this function? What is this button supposed to do? Where is it supposed to link to? What happens if you hover over something? We want to know every little detail about the design, so that the developers don't keep coming back to the design team and saying, I don't know what this is supposed to do. How do I fix this? Because it can be overwhelming, right? Especially when developers are getting into the nitty-gritty of like building the application out. And so we're also doing high fidelity comps at that time too. So we start building out what they'll look like and what they'll feel like. And this is where our customers are starting to get the most excited, right? They're starting to see that there's a focus on the overall design. There's fonts, the imagery, all the iconography libraries are starting to be designed and built. We start to manage all the assets in maintainable ways. So we start, creating, Figma, for example, right? We start to build components that are reusable across multiple artboards, right? We start to think about design systems. So what are the components that we can now build out into React components and build those out? And we're continuing to do usability testing throughout that entire process. And so, here's one that we did for Duke University. And again, it's just making sure that we're aligning things for desktop, mobile, tablet. We're building the iconography and making it clear for the user to move through the application. This was one for Corvist. So Corvist is like an interesting product. So we took on this account 2.5 years ago, and they had $500 million go through their application last year. So what they do is they sell an application that turns SAP data. So these big Fortune 100 companies have all of their sales data and inventory and everything in something called SAP. And they can hook into those SAP APIs and essentially turn it warehouses into e-commerce stores. And so we help them reimagine what their application could look like and how it could function. And then built out a design system. Now this is just obviously a couple of elements of the design system, but like, what does the iconography look like? These are all maintained in ways that if we change it here, it changes it globally. The typography, the color profiles, things like that. Sonos, this is a project we worked on Sonos a number of years ago. They were building pop-up studios in London, Paris, Berlin, and LA. And we were just trying to help them be able to sell tickets online for these events, which was a pretty fun project. This was for a university in the US. And the problem for this one was students were having a hard time understanding how to register for financial aid in the US because it was really, really complicated process. There's lots of steps to do. And so we did a complete redesign and re-architecture of their platform to make sure that they could register for classes properly, and then they knew what to do next, right? And then also for the financial aid side, like what is the actual logical step that needs to be taken to get financial aid for school. This was that diving app that we did a couple years last year, and again, it's this stuff's iterative. It's going to change over time, but it's fun to kind of think through like how how tickets look like for an event, or what a used ticket looks like for an event, and what the experience of going through the application is. So this is important, right? And I think it's sometimes forgotten, and I think accessibility should be the norm, not a feature. And I think that's an important statement, because I remember 10, 15 years ago, accessibility was actually a line item on a quote. And it can't be, right? I mean, this is, as user experience professionals and as designers, we need to be ensuring that it's like ingrained in our process. I think in Canada, it's 22% of Canadians that live with some kind of disability. In the US, it's 20%. So we're talking like 70 to 80 million people just in North America alone have some kind of disability. And I think from a design perspective, it's easy for us to think right away that, oh, this is like visual impairment. And yes, of course, that's a component of it. So with visual impairments, we're always thinking about color contrast ratios, potentially size of font. We want to make sure that buttons and notifications are like put in context, but there's many different types of disabilities that need to be considered, right? It could be users who live with anxiety, right? So for users who live with anxiety, we want to make sure that we're giving those users or visitors enough time to complete actions within the step, right? Or explain what's going to happen next in a process, right? You might have customers who are have physical disabilities or motor control disabilities, right? So you need to make large clickable buttons, give lots of space around your design so that they can click those. There's also users on the autistic spectrum. And if you're autistic, right, we want to think about using simple colors, writing in plain language, using simple sentences and bullets, right, like that type of thing for autistic users. And then there's also users who are deaf or hard of hearing. And so we want to make sure that we're writing in plain English. If you're providing videos, then we need to make sure that there's subtitles and transcripts available. So there's lots of different types of disabilities we need to be considering when we're putting our designs together. An example, this is actually the third or fourth largest accounting firm in the United States. They hired us to do a complete audit of an application of their new website. This is a few years back. And the first test we ran was for visual impairment. And what happened was their site was unreadable by somebody who was visually impaired. You just couldn't read it. And so it got worse as we went into this project. But this is the kind of stuff you need to be thinking about right from the start of our project, not once it's live, because some of these things just can't be fixed simply. And it costs lots of money to start doing this stuff over again, because it's not as simple as just making the text bigger and white. It's like much more ingrained into the application. So in terms of tools, so this is just a short list of some of the tools that we use. Note Shelf is one that we use a lot on our iPads. That's so we're sketching with our digital pens. And the reason we use Sketch digitally is really because it's so simple to take that sketch and then upload it to something like InVision to run tests. So Note Shelf has been a good one for us. We also use it for handwritten notes because you can create little books, which is good. Mural is another tool. There's others like Miro, and that's for our workshops. So a lot of our workshops get done on that. So that one that I showed at the start with the sticky notes, that was Mural. Figma is interesting. So we just moved to Figma this year. So for the entire time we've had the company, we've been a Sketch shop, and I really love Sketch for what it's worth. But the issue with Sketch is when you're working remotely, we need to make sure that we're all able to work on the same files at the same time. So we would link that with something called Abstract so that we could version control our design files. And then we were pushing to Envision. And the reality is that Figma really streamlines that process. There are things I don't like in Figma, but the advantages are much more in Figma. And then working collaboratively is really fantastic. And XD is great too. So all of those tools are good for the user experience and design process. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about research and tests and feedback. I want to give some examples of stuff that we're doing. I think it's important to realize that, as designers, much of our work is really subjective, right? So we can design something, and you might have 3 people who say they love it, and then you might have 3 people who say, well, I don't really like it. And it's a subjective thing. So as user experience and design professionals, we need to be backing up our design decisions with actual data. It's super important because it's hard to argue when you have a way to back that up. It's also, as designers, right? The reality is what we do in the shop that we run, there are lots of shops like us, right? There's lots of design and development shops. And I think if you're actually showing true value to your customers, it's harder for them to want to go to another shop. So it's important to back up your work with data. These are some example tests and things that we run and research that we run with some of our clients. This is Autodesk University. So this is their biggest conference of the year. And one of the great things about their conference is they actually have something called the Idea Exchange, which is, you can see in the image on the bottom, they have all these studies that are running, lots of different studies. And when somebody comes by, they can choose to be a part of that study, and they press the light, they take the card, and then they come sit at our table. So the top right image is myself and my client, Susie, and we're interviewing one of their customers. And we can get really, really great feedback about, how's the application working for them? Are there things that we can make better? There's lots of different things that we're trying to understand with our studies. Sometimes it's, especially over the past 2 years, we're doing it virtually. So this is Susie and I again interviewing customers virtually. We're just using an Airtable to track all of our interview data, and again, it's helping us so that we can make better decisions in terms of the design process. Sometimes we're doing customer feedback. So these are like little polls that pop up on your website. These ones were for an e-commerce store in the US that sells running shoes. And we just wanted little bits of information that can help us make better decisions. And so all this little data can help in different ways. We're always looking at Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, and other analytic packages. We want to understand as much as we can about a site. This is this particular slide is the accounting firm in the US, and they had launched their new site from another shop, and you can see that their traffic completely tanked after they're launching it. And so it's our job then to go in and try to figure out why did it tank? What was the result of that? Why did it turn out to be that way? And then we start building things like custom dashboards in whatever packages. This one happens to be Google Analytics, but we want to know as much information as physically possible about what's going on the sites that we're working on, the applications that we're working on. So, revenue by country is important, right? Demographic information even down to revenue is also important, right? So that's also really great to see. And I think if you start looking at the data and tracking the data, over time, you actually start to see problems that you might not see at the start. So for example, this particular customer here, we knew that 60% of their traffic was coming on Safari. And unfortunately, in terms of revenue, it was like 3rd or 4th in the list. And that didn't make a lot of sense after we were tracking it for some time. So we started digging in, and it turns out it was a JavaScript error on the Buy Now button. And as soon as that was corrected, then obviously the Safari sales on Safari went to the first place in terms of their analytics. So we likely wouldn't have noticed that without tracking it from the start. So it's important to keep an eye on things. This is another feature we were working on. We were building out a new category block for them. They sell ski wear and winter wear, and we just wanted to understand how are people clicking on it, what is selling when they do click on links, because that'll help with marketing efforts, and then just how are they interacting with it in general. And what was interesting about this is you could see there was like $85,000 in this time frame for this one category block. But what was interesting is the kids boys links on the bottom. We can see on the bottom chart, those are all the products that were sold when somebody clicked on those links. And the top number 1 and number 2 products that were sold there are actually women's products. They were a women's jacket and a women's pants, so not related to the kids section at all. And so while it might not be a major design thing to think of, but it's a great marketing piece of marketing information that's good to know. And one of the changes that happened there was in the kids section, they started doing calls to action for women's products as well. So ski wear. So just interesting to see. This is some data. So we run funnel analysis when we can for customers. So we want to understand, like, we can set up some goals, like what is the stages to actually get to a conversion, and it's hard with some sites to figure out what a conversion is. So defining what a conversion is, it's easier with others. This is Sticker Giant in the US. And when we started working with them, they were doing about 200,000 a month in sales. And now I think they're going to be close to $3 million a month in sales. And that's because of iterative changes constantly. They're always trying to improve. And this is an example of one that was early on. But they had a 9-step process to order a custom sticker. And what was interesting here was when we ran the funnel analysis, we could see that at the size stage, which is the stage 3, there was a 45% drop off of visitors. And then when they got to the 5th stage, which was quantity, choosing your quantity, there was a 60% drop off. And so we started digging into why was that happening, and we interviewed some customers. And the problem was that you couldn't get a price until you chose your size and then chose the quantity. And so the result there was we built an updated step. So we reduced the steps by 1, and we combined the quantity and the size so that you could see the price instantly. And then all of a sudden, things changed. We had less drop-offs in the process. Another tool we do use is tree tests. And so this is really just to try to understand, like, what is the path to get to content, right? So how are customers actually getting to that content? And you can see on the top right, there's kind of like a stacked list of this is essentially their information architecture. This is all of the content and grouped in the way that it is in the actual navigation. And so then we write scenarios. So this particular scenario is, suppose you're looking for a new job as a tax manager. How would you search for this type of position? It's relatively simple scenario, but we want to understand if they're actually able to find it. And so then we recruit a bunch of users, they go, they test it, and then we get the results at the end. And it was a 59% success rate. It's not great, it's not horrible, but at least we have the data now that we can use to start making those iterative changes, right? Here's another example from the same site, actually. And we wanted to test this because we were confident there was a problem. So I think, when we're thinking about experience, we want to make sure that we're using common patterns, right? So everybody knows what a blog is, right? So if you wrote blog, everybody would know that that's where articles are going to be. Well, on this particular site, their blog was called Thought Leadership. And they also had another blog section sort of called Insights. And so we were actually very explicit about what we were looking for in the scenario. So we said, suppose you're looking for an article about GDPR, how would you locate it? So we're already telling them it's an article, and we're already telling them that it's about GDPR. We had a 12% success rate. So really, really poor. And we were able to change that with one simple fix, which was turning the name to blog. So super important to keep track of that stuff and test it. We do a lot of heat maps, so like scroll maps, move maps, click maps. We want to understand like how people are actually interacting with the application. And so what's interesting about this one is of course it's an e-commerce site, and you have this long list of facets down the left-hand side, and you have all of your products. In this case, they're showing 9 products. And what we can see is that 50% of the users made it to the bottom of the products. That means 50% of the people left before they saw the bottom of the products, right? And so we want to make sure that we're getting the most in front of people as we possibly can. But what was more interesting is the center image, which is a move map, right? So we can see that customers are moving down the entire faceted list to look for ways to group their products and find their products that they're looking for. And 30% of them made it to the bottom of that facet list, even though there weren't products being displayed on the right-hand side. So a couple things that came out of this were showing more products on the page so that there wasn't white space was number one. We also improved how facets work so that more things were up near the top and making it simpler to make those decisions without having to scroll all the way to the bottom. Here's another example where there's a number of different icons that can go to different sections of the website. And on the desktop version, you can see that 98% of the users actually saw each of those icons. We've highlighted a couple there where you can actually see which ones got clicked the most. So that helps with kind of ordering what is important to most of your users. But what was interesting is when we went to mobile, you could see that only 42% of the users made it to the bottom of those icons. And the reason for that is they had to scroll further, right? So the recommendation there, of course, is double up the icons so they're side by side all the way down, and you can get more users to see the icons before leaving. We run A/B tests a fair bit, and this is an example of one for that ski company. So we came in to audit and make some recommendations for them. So we didn't do the overall design at the start. We were just coming in to help them with experience. And one of the things we wanted to test was, can we get higher conversion rate if we expose the sizes, right? So instead of having sizes as a drop down, but having size shown as individual exposed sizes. And there was actually an increase in conversion rate when we went to that. So we implemented it. And the way we used in this particular case was Google Optimize. But there's lots of tools out there that do that. I mean, VWO is another similar product that does these A/B tests. But it gives us this information. It'll put the tests all against each other. On the screen here, there's only 2, but sometimes there's 3 or 4 running at the same time. And you can see which ones are actually performing the best. And at the end, we can then implement the one that converted higher. First click test. This is another one that we've done a lot of. We've used a lot. I mean, there was a study done a while ago that said 87% of people who find themselves on the right path after the first click will successfully complete that task. And so making sure that the very first click that they take is important, right? We want to make sure that that's the one that leads them down to the path to that conversion. And so we can run these things called first click tests. And so we have to set a baseline with it. And with the baseline, what we're trying to do is we take the existing application, the existing site, and we take screenshots of them and we upload them to a service that we use to run the tests, and we create scenarios, right? And so here's a scenario where you just received the sticker design from the creative team. How would you add that file to this order? And as soon as the user clicks on the screen, the test is done and it moves on to the next scenario. And what was interesting here is you can see, the right answer, of course, is the red button, but they had a blue button as well at that time. And so there's only a 58% success rate for clicking on that button. So some users went to the blue one. So again, taking an iterative approach, we come out, we make minor changes, and we run the exact same scenario with a different comp, and we try to improve on 58%. And in this case, it was 74%. And since then, we've run many other tests to keep improving it and changing it. So it's always trying to improve where you're at. This is another example where the customer came to us and said, we have just built an email that gets sent out automatically after they place an order, and there is an approve your artwork button that would take you to the website to see your artwork and move on. But the customer was adamant that they needed to have a PDF included in the email, because that's what customers are really going to want when they view it. And so we started looking at what is the development effort to build out that functionality, and it's thousands of dollars ultimately, right, to build one piece of functionality to add that PDF to the email. And so what we said was, well, let's test it first to see if people are actually going to want to use the PDF. And so we ran a scenario, and what happened was 88% of the people clicked the big blue button to approve on the website, and 2% actually clicked the PDF. So from a return on investment, it didn't make sense to build that. But having the data to back up the decision was the important piece there. And at the end of those tests, we end up getting like a report much like this. And I think this is something you'll learn as you're working in the industry too, is that you have to read between the lines a little bit. You know, because this one scenario here, you can see that there's two that we've marked here in red that show a success rate, right? So yes, they got the right answer, or they clicked in the right appropriate place, but the time to do that was like 35 seconds and 26 seconds. That's an incredible amount of time to complete a task. Whereas the next task over, you can see success rates of like 4.5 seconds and 3.5 seconds, right? So much, much faster. So, you know, while this is a success, there's probably room for improvement, right? And then we provide the customer with a report that looks somewhat like this. It's essentially showing the variations we tested, the percentage that came back, whether they had an impact or not, and then any recommendations and notes so that we can test again and make future improvements. We use user recordings a fair bit. So these are anonymous. They're running in the background. And the reason for it is, you know, what users say they do and what they actually do are usually completely different, right? And so actually seeing them use an application is super useful from a study perspective. We want to understand like where are you clicking and why you're clicking. And so this is an example of that. So this was an application we came in to audit. And for some reason, please don't do this on any website. Don't ever have audio playing when you first land on a website. But that's what they had. They had audio playing. And in every single recording we saw, the first thing people did was go beeline right to the turn audio off. And it's okay. It's good enough to show a customer that. But I think we want, as designers, we want to make sure we're showing as much information to prove why they're doing that, right? And so when we compared it with analytical data, we can see that most of the traffic was coming from desktop. And when we compared it against hours of the day, it was between 9 and 5. So these are people sitting in their cubicle at work, and all of a sudden the audio is playing and they're trying to turn it off so they're not disrupting others around them, right? So we can start to build a picture of what's happening there when you start combining the information. Here's some examples. So this is a recording, and I'll explain the recording a little bit first before I play it. But we came in to audit this site, so we didn't do the design, but we came in to audit it. This is a really bizarre checkout process for this customer. So they do ski wear. We ended up changing things now, so things are totally different. But when we first took it over, they have this process where they don't sell direct to the customer. All sales are done through a dealer. But they wanted to have the e-commerce experience on their website, but that's difficult when you sell through dealers. So what they built was this functionality where you choose a color, and then you have to choose a size. And once you've done those two things, it exposes, and I'll play it now. It exposes logos of dealers that you can now check out on their site with that product. And you can see this user, they're confused, and then they finally click the size. And what happens is the logos are exposed, and they click the title, Buy Online Now, and they have no idea that they were supposed to click those logos, and then they leave the site. So I'll play it again here. You can see them a little confused, don't know what to do. And then he or she goes and finally decides they got to pick a size, and they choose the size, the logos display, and they click Buy Online Now. Doesn't work, right? It's a bizarre user experience. But being able to see that firsthand helps us immensely, right? Because we can now make better design decisions and back it up when we go to talk to our customers. So the next video, remembering that you need to choose the color of the product and you need to choose a size to get the buy now functionality. Here's the next one. So this is on mobile, and this is hats, right? And it turns out that these are one size fits all, which means you can never choose a size, meaning you can never get the logos, so you can never actually buy those products online. And customers won't tell you; they'll just leave, right? And they won't come back. So having these recordings and showing the problem there is super useful. This is again same site, and this is where we're starting to get into making some of the iterative changes. So in this video, you can see now there's an add to bag there's an add to bag button. So what we were doing was we had convinced them to build a cart functionality into their existing site. And the reason for that was on the existing one where you chose the logo meant that you could only buy a single product at one time, right? You can't add anything to a cart. So as soon as you're on the product page, you go directly to the dealer site. So if you wanted matching pants, you had to come back to the site, choose the pants, and then check out on the dealer site. And it might actually be a different dealer. So what we proposed was building in cart functionality, let the customer do what they normally would do, which is add the items they want to their cart. And then from in the logic of the site, we would then figure out what dealer has all of those products available, and then you could check out on that dealer site with all those products. And so we also built in functionality for our recommendation engine. And so it's not about the design here, it's about the experience. And this one was positive, right? We could see that the customers going through and checking different sizes. They start to add products to their cart. And then as soon as things end up in the cart, we can start to see them looking at the recommendations and then adding recommendations to the cart as well. So this is all just about taking one thing and iteratively improving it and making it better. And then later on, there were phases where we went and redesigned the entire application for them. But right now, it was more about just making sure we could get conversions handled first, making sure we're getting the revenue coming in so that we can actually make the design better in the future. You can see here, of course, they're adding new products to their cart for the checkout. So those are all great. It's good to see that information. But I thought what I would do is I would share something that happened during that process, which was a bit of a failure on our side, and also a good learning experience, right? So again, this is that same customer. You have to choose a color, you have to choose a size, you get the dealers, you get the dealer logos that you can check out with. So it's you can only check out with one product at a time. So it would take you to their dealer and then you would buy that product. And we had convinced them to go to the add to bag functionality where we built a cart. And so we got that all built and we launched it. And in the first week, we were down $250,000 in revenue. And so we had gone through all this effort to say add to bag functionality is the thing that's going to increase revenue. It also means you're going to be able to sell more than one product at a time. There's all these things that we're convincing them about. And we launched, we're down $250,000 and everybody's panicking. We can't figure out what's going on. We have no idea why it's happening. Things that were going through our head where, is it sticker shock because their products are very expensive? So now there's multiple products in a cart and they total a big number. Was there decrease in trust because then once they had all this product in there, then we're sending them to another site to check out. It was a very bizarre experience. And so here's what we found was we ended up rolling back to the old version because everybody was panicking and we just needed to make sure that we weren't losing any more money. But we still need to understand why that was happening. And so it actually took us a couple of weeks. But here's what happened. So week 1 was our launch of the new Buy Now button. Week 2 was rolling back to the old version. And we had near identical traffic from week over week. So that couldn't have contributed to the overall decrease in sales when we rolled out our new functionality. But there was an 8% increase in conversions when we rolled back to the old version of the site. And this was baffling because, we're taking something that you can now buy multiple products down to a single order. We're giving them the old bizarre checkout experience. We even saw that the average order size from week 1 went from $306 down to $170 in week 2. So, and that would be expected because you could buy multiple products versus a single product. But what was interesting was there was one piece of data we never even considered until weeks later when we're trying to figure it all out. And that one piece of data was that there was an average 10-degree drop in temperature in all their key markets in week 2. So they sell winter wear. And so what it was had nothing to do with what we had built, but outside, outside things outside of our control really that affected it. And so it's good to know this now because we're now much more aware of it. But I think it also presented us with, and since then, of course, we've reverted back. So it's now the Buy Now button on the site, and revenue's gone significantly better over the past few years. But it presented an opportunity too, and I think we never wanted to be in that situation again. So we actually wrote a script for Google Analytics that actually tracks the weather for every single visitor that goes to their site. So we can actually see that as the temperatures go down, we can start to see the revenue, the sales go up. So we actually get this figure 8 pattern in Google Analytics, and we're actually using that for future. Like, if we know that it's going to be colder in a region, they can start to make marketing changes and recommendations in their application. And us personally, Relevant Bits, we actually built an application for ourselves that we have a product that does this as well. So we can actually make future predictions on weather and swap out content based on weather so that you can have increased conversions. So I started, of course, with the first image, right, where we've got the roundabout with, and the developer of that obviously didn't anticipate people walking straight across. So I think it's important to remember that we need to be intentional about the user experience that we design. And what I love about the bottom image is that this is people learning from what their visitors / users want. And they've gone and improved it by paving the path, right? They've learned from what's happening and make improvements. So great, really important to do that. And so I think I'm almost done here. As our job as UX designers and designers in general is to align user goals with the business objectives of the organization. So I mean, it's our responsibility to be data informed so we can iterate and improve and make the experience better for our customers. And that's good for our customers, but it's also good for the business, right? That's going to turn into financial success. It's going to turn into improvements in your return on investment. And when you're getting money coming in and the return on investment is good, then your customers end up hiring you to do more work because you're helping them. So these are high level things, but I think great UX and visual designers have an understanding of the design principles, and I think many of you are in school for this right now and learning from it. And so it's good to understand contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity, all those design principles you're learning in school. You need to be a good communicator, right? So communicate well. That's a big part of our job now. You need to have a need to solve problems, because really that's the purpose of our job now. It's not just making things look pretty, right? We're trying to make sure that we're solving an actual business problem. You need to validate your assumptions. Experiment, right? So things are not always going to work out great. So we want to make sure that we're experimenting and trying new things and having data to back that up. Don't pretend to know everything. I mean, I've been doing this for 22 years and I can tell you, I don't know everything. I'm learning on every single job. Nicole's probably is on this call, I'm sure. I'm like constantly the proverbial idiot in the room and always saying like, I have no clue. We just got to figure out a way to, figure this out. And what is the best way to do that, right? So just come in and try to figure out what you need to know. And I think, all great UX and visual designers are data informed. It's super critical. And then one last one that I would throw in is make sure that you're thick-skinned, because this industry will kill you if you're not. There are times when people are just very honest and will say, I don't like that. And I think if you are data informed, you're going to have a much better way to come back and say, well, that's fine, but this meets some goal, right? And so just having thick skin will help with that process. I thought I would recommend a couple of books that I think are really great. If you're interested in some good reads, Atomic Design by Brad Frost is one of my favorite books. And the thing I love about it is it's about design systems, right? It's like, how do you break down a design? And we don't use his methodology to the nth degree. I would say, he breaks it down to atoms, molecules, organisms, templates, and pages. We use the atoms, molecules, and organisms on almost every single project we work on. So the methodology is really great and something to look at. Sprint by Jake Knapp's a great book. I don't necessarily think that you need to read that thinking that you're going to do 5-day sprints with your design process, but the things that he talks about for each of those days is really great and important. So you can probably learn something from that. The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. So Don Norman, of course, is from the Nielsen Norman Group. Really great book if you're thinking about, if you're interested in something called the Double Diamond Methodology. So it's designing the right thing and then designing things right. And so it kind of breaks down into two categories. So that's a great book. And then almost anything from Rosenfeld Media. They have, the thing I love about the Rosenfeld Media books are they're all super short and they're all super focused. So you can have, there's books about project management, like the how to interview users. They're all really nice short books, but super interesting. That's it. So thanks for having me, and good luck this weekend with the prototypes that you're all building. And I would say make sure that you tap into the experience of the mentors this weekend. I mean, they're all here to support you and have fun. So, and I personally can't wait to see all the presentations on Sunday. So great stuff.
Additionally, great stuff from you, Mark. That was just a fantastic presentation. Like the number of just concrete examples, I think, was like super helpful in terms of actually getting your point. Because I think, especially as design students, you hear a lot, like all of these things of like the concepts of how to be a good designer, but actually having those concrete case studies and examples is just so helpful. And I think that reflects in some of the questions that we have. So if you have a few minutes now, we can
of course. And I think the one thing I'll just add, Rachel, is I think you can start small, right? I mean, we've shown a lot of different things and examples you can do, right? You don't have to do all of those, right? And every project's going to be different. I think you just need to pick and choose what's right for that project at that moment in time. And over time, learn all different things and methodologies and tests that you can run.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Because at the same time, it's like all of these examples, like some people, if you're watching this and you're feeling overwhelmed, like it shows how much you can learn, but it's also, you just start somewhere, that's what we do for everything. So let's start off with the first question. Okay, so some of these questions are kind of a little bit more related to your talk, and then some are, I think, related towards the problem statement. So I'll try and start off with the talk ones and then move into that. So the first thing is, one question from UCN is, how important is it to have kind of like an artistic background as a UX researcher? Wow, it's on the screen. Amazing. Would you say it's like a valuable skill to have when you're collaborating with the UI designers in the team?
Yeah, I don't know that you need to have an artistic background to be a UX researcher at all. I mean, it's more about trying to understand the problem, trying to understand where to go look for answers for that problem, and then documenting it. It's more of a documentation job, right, for research. I mean, even when you're thinking about something like, we use Mural for running workshops. We use Mural for other things other than workshops. We use it for just like workflows, right? Here's the research, here's how we can start to piece it together, and then it can be handed off to a UI designer if that's what it needs to, or go off to a user experience designer. But yeah, the research, you don't necessarily need to have an artistic background for that.
Yeah, perfect. It's all about the collaboration, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Then moving, this is kind of jumping back to how there's so much to learn. If you were starting off in the UX field now, how would you just go about that first step of learning the key skills to break into the fields? Like, I know you mentioned books, but is there anything else that you would say is like the first step for someone to do?
I think it's getting involved in communities, right? Like, I think it's, I mean, all I do is, I feel like all I do is ask dumb questions all day long, right? And it's because I don't have the answers to what I'm trying to solve. And that means having meetings with people who have diverse views, right? And we were lucky, we have a team here that range from UX researchers up to engineers, and so you get diverse views just in that. And we also have our team is across many different countries, so we also get different views from geographical locations. And I think you can do that in friend groups, and you can do that through Slack groups and things like that. I think it's where to start is like lots of reading. Try to understand understand what it is that you want to do, number one, And if it's design, great. If it's research, great. If it's you want to run workshops and that's all you want to do, that's a thing too. So deciding what you want to do, and then just start reading as much as you can and starting to get involved in the community, because there's communities around almost all of this stuff, right? I mean, that's what this is this weekend too, right? It's meeting people and trying to learn from them.
Yeah, exactly.
Me too, me included.
And if you're looking for a good community, I know that Design Buddies has a super active Discord, and they have a whole bunch of talks all of the time. So if you just want to, when I first started going into UX, not that I'm super far along with that journey, I would just go onto Eventbrite and search up what kind of talks are going on, because that's an easy way. If you're like, I can't sit down and read a full book right now or something like that, getting involved in that community and the actual talks that they're putting on is, I think, super helpful. And I'm just going to read out this comment from Nicole, because she was talking about kind of the same thing you were, that we are all idiots at the beginning of a project, and that's kind of it's a great.
It's true. I mean, almost every project we don't necessarily know what it is that we're getting into, right? And I think it's just making sure that you're aware. I mean, here's the thing: when we're working with other customers, they're the experts, right? They're the experts on their problem. They know what they're asking for. It doesn't mean they know how to answer that question. And so when they come to us, it's our job to ask the right questions and try to decipher what it is that they're really trying to accomplish. Because sometimes what they're asking for and what they need are totally different things. And so it's our job to figure out what that is. And it's all about communicating. I mean, that, and trying to find the right tools to help that. And sometimes it's just having a conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through all of these questions, because I know we could probably extend off one of these for a while. But Alman was also wondering if there's any kind of difference if a project is open source or closed source, like how the design process changes over that.
Yeah, I would say so. I've worked on Drupal in the past for many years, being an open source product. I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you're talking about the actual design of the open source projects, right? So if you're thinking about contributing to Drupal, that's different, because there's a process that is involved there. So is that what you mean, or do you want me to just go in both directions?
I think maybe go in both directions, because I'm not sure.
Okay, so sounds good. Okay, so let's use Drupal as an example. It's an open source platform that can be used. There are multiple ways to be involved in design when using Drupal. One might be actually contributing to the open source project for Drupal, which you can do. And there's a whole load of processes that go in there, because you can't just contribute to that without it being accepted from the team there. If you're thinking about from an open source standpoint, where just using Drupal or Magento or other open source platforms, then the design process is mostly the same as we would do for anything else, except that from a technology standpoint, there's extra cost for the customer, right? I mean, because although open source is free, it's not really free, right? Because there's constant maintenance to keep the application running, which is usually monthly fee. But the design piece of it is probably not as impacted as the technology side of it.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question, Elman.
I think it was a good start. If it doesn't, and this goes for everyone's question, because I don't know how many we'll get to, but if you have more questions about this, as Mark said, he's available most of the weekend, so please take advantage of like the coffee chats that are going on. Book one of those with him, and you can have a whole half an hour talking to him about all of this stuff. I think we will head into a little bit more specific with Relevant Bits, and just how is Relevant Bits different from all of those other UX design companies that that kind of offer these same services?
Yeah, that's the best question. When you have an answer to that tell me. And it's one we wrestle with, right? I think the challenge is that there are lots of companies that are doing similar things, and so the way we differentiate ourselves is we tend to take on the much bigger projects, the things that are the most complicated, because there's less competition for those types of projects, and like when there's a small to medium-sized project, we need to do a number of those at the start. There's so much competition for those projects, and it comes at that level. It's all about price for those customers, right? And so it ends up becoming a race to the bottom, unfortunately. So we tend to take on the bigger, more complicated things. So like business-to-business e-commerce projects, things that are like major complicated in terms of like running in 70 plus countries in 30 languages, right? How many currencies, right? All of those really complicated things, invoices that need to be done for tax purposes in each of those regions around the world. It could be things like we do a lot of work for the Autodesk University, so it's like making sure we can sustain traffic for 100,000 consecutive users for a conference, right? I mean, it's like making sure that all that's kind of built. So that's the way we differentiate now. And I think the tie between, there's a lot of great engineering shops. There's a lot of great branding and design shops. And I think where we're a little bit different is we have a really, really strong engineering team, but we also have an equally strong user experience and design team. And so that kind of has won us a lot of work over the past number of years.
Yeah, it's just crazy thinking about that scale. Like,
yeah,
how it just like bridging off of that, how large is your team? Like, how large is Relevant Bits?
Yeah, we're really small. We're only 15 people.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're busy and constantly trying to find new people but I don't think we want to grow too much either. I mean, I like that we have a small team because people are happy and we can kind of control our own destiny a little bit and make sure that we're taking on the right work and we're picking work that also makes our team happy too, not just our customers. Right. So
yeah, no, that's important. And that goes perfectly into Kaiju Tay's question, which is just how your team is currently managing both the team and also the customer's well-being.
Yeah, that's a tough question.
Just throwing them at you.
No, it's good. It's a good one. So there's a number of ways that we've tried to I think there's a number of factors here, right? So the factors are all the same all the time. It's always timeline, budget, quality of work, and scope of work, right? And all of those affect both sides of the equation, right? Your customers and us. And I think being transparent is super important so that everybody is all on the same page, customers and us, right? We all need to be on the same page. I think it's important to think about how we actually start projects, right? So setting realistic goals is super important because everybody needs to know what they're aiming for, because if they're not, then people can see different things in the project. They're like, oh, this is the most important to me, and this is the most important to me, and then nobody's happy at the end. We all need to be going towards the same goal. So so project management plays a big part in that, making sure you have a strong project manager that is managing that process and making sure that everybody is working towards the same thing. I think cost is a thing that we've tried to fix over the years. Time and materials was not a good fit for us years ago, so we started with time and materials, and the issue there is that you could create tickets for people to design, develop, do all these things, right? All these tasks that need to be created, but we don't want to be task rabbits, right? We don't want to be like just, oh, here's a ticket, I'm going to go do whatever it says in this ticket. We want you to stop and say, why am I doing this? Like, why am I building this ticket? And that's difficult to do when you're charging by the hour. So we went to something called value-based pricing, which is to eliminate the problems on our end with trying to manage that, and then also on our customers' end, because then they get predictability in pricing. So we will quote out what the project costs. We'll tell them how long it's going to take, and we're very realistic about the timelines. If we can't do it if they want it done in 2 months and we say it's going to be 3 months, and then we can't agree on that, we'll let the project go, because it's not going to be a good fit, right? Because we need to be managing how much work our team is doing, keeping a realistic, healthy work-life balance, because things can go off the rails really quickly. But it's lots of like little things like that I think we've tried to adjust to make things more streamlined for that. But we do turn down work. I mean, we turn down more work than we accept work. Let's put it that way, because it's just not the right fit. And I think that's hard to do. For me personally, turning down work is like a gut punch. It's like, oh, that could have been great money, but in the end, it's not going to be a good fit. It's going to cost us money, and there's other projects out there that'll be a better fit for you. So I think knowing what to look for is also important.
Yeah, that was an excellent answer. Yeah, I feel like that's the hardest thing, of learning when to say no to something.
It's hard,
but
it's really hard.
Yeah, it brings you to what the better yes is, which is so important to learn. And I think it's really good that you touched on that. So I think we'll end it off with one more question. I have kind of written down any of the questions we didn't get to, so I'll share those with you, Mark, and we can potentially talk to people on the Discord or something like that. Or again, the coffee chats, guys, book those. But yeah, we can end it off with Quinn's question on opportunities for students to get involved anytime in the near future, if there's any internships or anything like that.
So we have an intern right now from University of Guelph. We have an intern starting in January from Mohawk College. Wilfrid Laurier has reached out last week, so they're also looking for internships. So I know there's lots of universities that are looking for placements right now, and yes, of course we do take them. And right now, even the government too is like offering grants for interns. I mean, they'll pay 75% of the cost of interns. So there's lots of good incentives too to even bring interns on.
Awesome. And on that note, we are collecting resumes at this Designathon. So if you're interested in submitting your resume, then we'll be sharing that with Relevant Bits with TWG and Deloitte Business, so that you can kind of potentially, have a further conversation on this with Mark or someone else. So yeah, I think that goes to the end of our time, because we've got another talk in just 10 minutes. And Alma just put in the chat the resume submission. So click that link and get some opportunities for yourself. But yeah, I think we'll end things off with just a note that this is being recorded, and we'll be trying to get this up on our YouTube channel by the end of the weekend. So there's so many great examples. If you want to go back to one of those and kind of look at it again and absorb it when you're not trying to figure out your own prototype for your own problem, you'll have that option. But yeah, thank you so much, Mark. Any final words?
No, have fun. I would say have fun, because that's what this is all about. And make sure you use the mentors. I mean, that's what they're here for. They're going to give you lots of good advice. I'm hoping. I'm sure
they will. They will. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. And we'll see you in 10 minutes if you join us for our next talk.